So because we've already had the decade of it. Feels like we've already reached abundance as I've shared. What the heck could be next? So let's talk about 50s and beyond. Let's land this airplane of success and show how small decisions that Manny made in his 20s and 30s and even 40s have culminated into a life of abundance. I'm curious to see what this means for him in his 50s and beyond.
So as you think about it, when you get into your 50s, some natural opportunities open up. You can now do catch-up contributions in your employer-sponsored accounts as well as in your IRA. So you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that. And you want to make sure that you're thinking about, how do I fine-tune my retirement plan? How do I fine-tune what I ultimately want my future decades to look like? So when you think about your tax-free buckets, one of the things that people always say when they get in the 50s is, man, I wish that bucket was bigger. I wish I could go back in time and shake the younger version of myself and say, max out that Roth IRA, max out that HSA, put money in the Roth 401k. Well, in your 50s, this might be the time where there are opportunities for you to increase this bucket. Are there ways that maybe you should think about either doing 401k contributions, or maybe if you leave the workforce in this decade, is this the decade that you start doing Roth conversions, where you start converting some of your pre-tax assets into tax-free assets at some of the lower marginal tax brackets?
Yeah, definitely a great decade, especially if you have a big income change in your life. Roth conversions is something definitely to take into account. If you retire early, go into the FINE movement, next endeavor, this is something also to look at. But that transition is this to tax deferred. Now that we heard this was the employer contribution, this is once you started making good bucks at work, that maybe this is where you were doing to save taxes. But this is now the problem where you're recognizing, hey man, everything I put in that tax deferred account, I'm going to have to take at 72 years of age as a required 75, because they keep pushing it up. It was 70 and a half, they went to 72, now it's 75. So required minimum distributions keep going up, but you know this money's going to be expensive because it's going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. So you're probably going to be like, yeah, this is nice, but I'm thinking more of, how do I build for the future? So you're probably not going to be adding and trying to build up a lot of money here. You're probably going to be looking at that after-tax bucket.
Because what's beautiful is when you have these three tax buckets, no matter what the tax policy in place is at your time of retirement, you get to manipulate your financial situation to choose what you want to pay in taxes. Because if all of these buckets are filled up and healthy, you get to pick and choose what buckets you pull from. So it's really interesting when we think about how we build up our assets. We generally start with tax-free and then move to tax-deferred and then move to after-tax. When it comes to decumulation, we kind of go in the opposite order. We pull out of the after-tax first, and then we'll pull out of the tax-deferred, and then last we pull out of the tax-free. Well,
little LIFO, little tax humor there.
That's a good accountant
I don't know if that's
joke.
humor, but LIFO.
No, it's hilarious. That's a really
last
good one.
in, first out.
No, it's so good. It's so good. So what's great is if you have that after-tax bucket, or at least in your 50s, if you can think about building up that after-tax bucket as you ease into retirement, you're going to give yourself options that, okay, if I do need to pull some money out for that new car, or I do want to go on that trip, or I do need to do that home improvement, or whatever that thing may be, you don't have to only count on your expensive tax-deferred money or your super valuable tax-free money. You have an after-tax bucket that you can pull from.
Well, the reason I bring up, because after-tax is great because it's such a bridge account. It doesn't have any restrictions on how much you can pull out other than just got to make sure you pay taxes. It also doesn't have restriction on how much you can put in. But I do find in decumulation, it's so interesting is that after-tax is the last place we go in, one of the early places we go out. Then we typically try to think about pre-tax so we can, do some Roth conversions or some income planning to avoid those required minimum distributions. But it is very consistent. We all try to hang on to those Roth assets, that tax-free as long as possible, because in the beginning, we were so excited about the young money millionaire opportunity of sticking it to the government. When you get older, you're thinking about legacy standpoint is, man, it'd be great for my kids or my loved ones to inherit this tax-free because it could grow for 10 years, have even additional opportunities. That's why it is important to kind of begin with the end in mind. Make sure you're creating a plan that takes into all those things.
All right, so let's see what Manny looks like. As a reminder, Manny started investing 15% at age 25, and he maxed out at 25% starting at age 35. He made $50,000 a year when he started his career, and every year he got a 5% pay raise. What that means now is that his income at this age, his income at 59, has grown to $352,000. Now, I know what you're saying is, oh my gosh, that's incredible, $50,000 to $350,000. If you account for inflation, if you back that down, it's essentially $107,000 in today's dollars. So essentially, Manny, over the course of his career, he was able to start with a $50,000 of purchasing power, and he's basically doubled that by the end of his career 40 years later. I don't think that seems crazy. He's also followed the financial order of operations to the T. He's done exactly what's laid out in the 9 steps of the tried and true process of what to do with your next dollar, and he's gotten the entire time a 5% match from his employer. So when he gets to retirement, when he gets to age 65, when he's finally ready to check out, you can see that inside of his tax-free bucket, he has over $4.5 million tax-free.
Do you see? Manny's loaded.
Manny
is loaded. I mean, and think about that. Hey, this is somebody, we didn't increase the annual contribution limits. We put reasonable pay raises built into it. He didn't even start right out of college. He still waited until he was 25. We put reasonable rates of return that decline over time. And Manny is absolutely loaded. It's amazing.
If you look at his tax-deferred bucket, even in that bucket, he has $1.7 million. And then his after-taxes bridge account, he has a little over $470,000. His savings rate stayed 25% from age 35 all the way to age 65. He didn't have to save more to have these incredible numbers. His wealth score is now a 2.92. He is certainly a prodigious accumulator of wealth. And when you look at his total portfolio value that he's been able to build up over a 40-year working career, almost $6.7 million.
I mean, if you think about just safe withdrawal rates, you could say, depending upon what age he retires, 65, you could do 4 to 4.5%. Manny, without a doubt, is going to have a very abundant retirement cash flow situation, and that's just incredible.
I'll put some numbers to it. We said that his terminal income was $350,000. At a 4% withdrawal rate, he would be able to replace 76% of his income starting at age 65. At a 4.5% withdrawal rate, he would be able to replace 85% of his income. Remember, he was still saving 25%. Yeah. So this means that Manny gets a pay raise. He actually gets to retire and have more money coming in than he was spending throughout his working life.
Plus potentially Social Security coming in on top of that. It's amazing to think about that he's going to be spending greater than 100 with Social Security and things, potentially 110% of what he was actually making and living off of after taxes and savings. Manny is living the life that I think a lot of us daydream about, and all it took was a combination of small decisions over time that led to abundance. Truly amazing.
If you look at his journey, that's exactly what it is. It was small decisions. It was a consistent journey. Now, what would really likely happen? Manny would have had options. He would have had options at 50, 55, 60 to choose what he wants the rest of his life to look like. What's amazing is that if you can figure this out early and you can start thinking about, how do I begin saving today for tomorrow? And how do I think about structuring my tax buckets? You get to control your financial future just like Manny did.
So let's load you up. I would encourage you, go to moneyguy.com/resources. That's where all the free stuff lies. Now, if you've liked in the in the background of this, we had how our net worth tool is looking at these 3 buckets. Go to learn.moneyguy.com if you also want to get some of those tools that will accelerate your journey. But here's the big takeaway is that I love that we showed how those little small decisions, because we talk about the 3 ingredients of wealth. The first one is discipline. And then you use that discipline to live on less than you make to create money. That's the margin that comes from that. That's the second ingredient is that money. Then if you give it number 3, time, enough time to let it grow upon itself and culminate and build and reach that critical mass, guys, you get rewarded. So your question today is, what small decision are you going to take? What little bit of today can you give for your much great, big, beautiful tomorrow?